Boris Spassky, the 10th world champion, was born in 1937. He played Petrosian for the crown in 1966 and lost that match, but he beat Petrosian in a rematch in 1969. And he was world champion until Bobby Fischer beat him in the famous 1972 match. Here's a game that Spassky played at age 11 in the Leningrad Junior Championship. Okay, Spassky has the white pieces. It was a queen's gambit accepted. Knight f3 controls the e5 square. Knight f6 controls e4. e3 supports d4 and opens up the diagonal for the light squared bishop. c5 strikes in the center. Bishop takes c4. e6. Okay, Spassky castles. a6 was played in order to support the move b5, gaining space on the queen side. Queen e2 opens up the d1 square so the rook can come to the d file and pressure the black queen. b5 expanding. Bishop b3. Those pawns on the queen side look menacing. You may wonder, should black play c4 here? That's a possibility, but those pawns can become overextended and white can undermine them with moves like a4. And the black king is still in the center and black has hardly any development. So he should focus on developing his pieces. He plays knight c6, which looks reasonable, but it has been criticized. In this position, I think bishop to b7 is considered more accurate. It's a more flexible move. Black intends to put the bishop there anyway. And in some cases, black may want to play knight from b to d7 to blunt any pressure that white gets down the d file against the queen. So knight to c6 may be committing the knight a little too early. Knight to c3 was played. C takes d4. I think that's also a bad move. I don't think black should be opening lines in the center of the board while he isn't developed and his king is still stuck in the center. Other plans that might have been better would be bishop to e7, getting ready to castle. Maybe d takes c5, castles could have followed. Or possibly, at this point, c4 could have been played just to close the center down. And then bishop c2, bishop b7, and so forth. Okay. But the move that was played in the game, c takes d4, looks wrong just because white has the superior development and the black king is still stuck in the center. Okay, white plays rook d1 before recapturing since the pawn is pinned to the queen. Bishop b7, e takes d4, and now there's going to be a fight for the d5 square. White would like to push the pawn to d5 and open more lines for his pieces. So black desperately tries knight to b4, and you'll notice he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces all supporting that square, although you can discount the pawn since it's pinned. Nevertheless, Spassky plays a very powerful move, d5 anyway. Okay, knight b takes d5, bishop g5. And look at this position. White has 3 pins in the position that are devastating. The knight is pinned to the queen, the pawn is pinned to the king, and that knight is pinned to the queen. Okay, bishop e7 gets out of a couple of the pins, but that does allow bishop takes f6. Now, black does have to take back with the g-pawn. If he takes back with the bishop, that puts this pawn back into a pin, and white simply wins material on d5. Yeah, he doesn't have enough defenders of his knight. So black takes with the g-pawn, and then white makes some exchanges on d5, and black's pawn structure is ruined and his king is unsafe. Okay, Spassky centralizes his knight and it's headed for the great outpost on f5 where it can pressure the bishop on e7. This queen might maneuver itself into the h6 square, so the king is in a lot of trouble. Okay, king gets the bishop out of its pin with king f8, but then knight f5 comes. H5 was tried to get the rook to support that h6 square, so that stops that plan. What else could black have done? Well, just to illustrate the danger he's in, suppose he plays queen to a7 to lend support to the bishop laterally. Then queen to e3 had it for h6. Let's say rook c7, just to see what happens if the queen does come to h6. So the king has to go to e8 here, since there's a mate on g7. So king to e8, but then knight to g7 check, and the king can't step onto f8 where it would give white a discovered check. So he's flushed the king out, and then rook takes d5 check, skewers the queen, and white wins. So that's the type of danger the black king is in right now. So h5 was played, and then Spassky sees that rook takes d5 is very powerful. Since the queen was overloaded, it was protecting the pawn and the bishop on e7. Okay. Black takes the rook and loses in a few moves. What else could he have tried? Maybe queen to e8, stepping to safety and still protecting the bishop. But then rook a d1, and now we'll look at two moves. Let's look at rook from a to d8 to oppose the rooks. Okay, queen takes bishop check, queen takes queen, rook takes rook. And that's winning. Queen has to block and sacrifice itself. So what else besides rook d8? Well, let's look at a non-move like b4, see what would happen. Okay, rook to d7, attacking that bishop. Bishop to c5 is the only way to save the bishop. But then queen to c4 attacks it again. Rook to c8 defends it. And then queen takes a6, and you'll see that this pawn on f6 is indefensible. There's no way to prevent its loss, and the queen will infiltrate and decide the game. So there really wasn't anything after rook takes d5. So black takes back, takes the rook, queen takes e7 check, king goes to g8, and now the final move, queen takes f6. Black resigns because there are two threats in the position. There's a mate on g7, but there's also a royal fork from e7, and black would have to give up the queen to stop mate. All right, so powerful game by an 11-year-old. Thanks for watching.